Hey guys, welcome back to the 17th episode of the Poker Vlog. I'm Huggy, and in this episode we're going to head to the lodge in Round Rock, Texas. I've got $500 in my pocket. I'm planning to buy in for either $200 twice or maybe $200 once and $300. I'm going to kind of feel out the table and decide from there what I want to buy in for, but I'm going to start with $200 and see where it goes from there. Let's get to it. In the first 30 minutes, I don't pick up much in terms of hands. I see a couple of flops where I end up whiffing and give up, losing some small bets here and there, until I look down at Ace-Jack offsuit. Now before I get into this hand, let me just explain really quickly about this action player sitting across the table from me who legitimately has 100% VPIP. He's raising every single hand, some he's not even looking at, and is somehow managing to connect with basically every board, running himself up a bit of a stack. The action player straddles for $12, there's two callers, so I re-raise to 60 on the button. The action player calls and the cutoff folds, so we're heads up to the flop. The action player checks dark, and I decide I'm just gonna go all in dark here for my last $93. The flop comes 7-8 deuce with two clubs. The action player thinks for a bit and finally makes the call. So we see a run out of the king of diamonds and the 8 of hearts on the turn and river. We completely miss, and I announce ace high expecting the worst. Unfortunately, the action player shows 7-5 offsuit for second pair on the flop, so we're off to rebuy for $300 this time. I'm in for $500 now. 10 minutes later, we look down at pocket aces sitting under the gun. I raise to $10, and it folds to the small blind who makes the call. The big blind then re-raises us to 32. I consider calling and going hard on the flop, but I'm already down a buy-in, and I don't want to get into a bad spot three-ways, so I decided to just 4-bet instead, making it 80 total. The small blind immediately folds, and the big blind groans before making the call. The flop comes Jack 6-4 with two clubs. The small blind leads into me for $100 now. I don't have much behind, and we're probably ahead as long as he doesn't have pocket jacks, so I just push all in for my last 210. And he says,
It's only 110 more. Damn it. I'm pretty sure you got me, but I'm gonna call you anyway.
Call. Oh, you got an all-in call?
You got kings, aces, what do you got?
I got aces, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
he shows pocket queens. We get a clean turn and river, and we double up, making up for the last all-in we lost against the action player.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah. I don't mind paying that.
About 30 minutes later, we pick up pocket jack sitting under the gun. I raise to $10, and this time the button re-raises to 35. I make the call, and we're heads up to the flop. I check dark. The flop comes 6-3-7 with two spades. My opponent continues for $30. I make a pretty easy call here with an overpair. The turn brings the 9 of diamonds. I check a second time, and now he bets 45. I'm worried we're behind a bigger pair, but I still don't feel like I could fold, so I call again and hope for the best. On the river, we see the 6 of diamonds. This card shouldn't change anything. I decide to lead out here with a blocking bet of $50. I want my opponent to be confused and hopefully just call, not raise. However, he almost immediately raises to $150. I didn't want to see a raise, but I'm also kind of suspicious of the size and speed with which he raised, especially considering the board texture that more likely hits my range. I've gotten the impression that this is a smart thinking player, and he's not just doing this with the nuts or a big hand. After apologizing to the table for taking a long time to act,
Alright, I'll pay you off.
we don't get to see what he had, but ace king or ace queen seems likely. We're too sticky to be bluffed out and win a nice pot.
Thank you. Yeah.
30 more minutes pass before we get another playable hand. We look down and see pocket king sitting in the small blind. There's one limper, the button raises to $10, and I 3-bet big since we're out of position, making it $40 total. The button calls and we're heads up to the flop, which comes 10 high. I c-bet for $55, our opponent quickly folds, and we happily scoop the pot. 5 minutes later, there's a $5 and $10 straddle on the first two players, making us first to act from the +2 position, and we look down at pocket aces again. I raised to $40 given the straddles, which honestly I could have raised a bit less here given the strength of our hand. The small blind calls, the under the gun straddle calls, and we're 3-ways to the flop. The flop looks pretty clean when it comes out king high. Both players check to me, and I c-bet for $75. Just the small blind calls after thinking for a while, so we're heads up to the turn. On the turn we see another king, the king of clubs. I'm really not liking this card, and I like it even less when the small blind leads into me now for $85. I don't think I can reasonably fold though, so I make the call. The river brings the 2 of diamonds, which is a total blank and shouldn't change anything. He leads into me again for $125 now, and you can hear I'm not happy.
I think I just have to pay you off. I call. If you have a king, you're good.
$25.
Yeah.
The goal should be to collect as many of those as possible, along with a bunch of chips.
That's it.
My opponent shows the bad news when he flips over ace-king suited, and we lose a massive pot to a 2-outer on the turn. I don't know. Maybe I could have found a fold on this river, but I didn't know enough about my opponent at the time, and there were enough missed draws between the flush and straight opportunities that I talked myself into a call here. I'm curious what you would have done in this situation. Let me know in the comments below. In the next interesting hand, we've got queen-jack offsuit sitting in the big blind. 2 players limp in, and the button raises to $15. I call, both limpers call, and we've got 4 to the flop, which comes 10 ace 8 rainbow. So we flop a double gutter. Any king or 9 gives us the straight. We all check to the pre-flop raiser, who c-bets now for $25. I make the call, and both other players fold, so we're heads up now. The turn brings the 6 of clubs. I check again, and now my opponent checks back, giving us a free river. On the river, we see the 2 of spades. We don't improve, and given my opponent's turn check, we might be able to steal this pot. I go ahead and lead now for $50. He pretty quickly folds, and it looks like our read was right. We scoop the pot with queen high.
Thank you.
Before we get into this next hand, I'm really interested in your feedback about my thought process here. I've got queen 8 offsuit, and I'm sitting on the button. It folds to me, and I raise a hand that I'd normally fold pre-flop as a button steal here. I make it $10. The small blind folds, and the big blind re-raises to $35. I know this player is a regular, and he doesn't strike me as the gambling type. However, what you didn't see in the vlog is that I've actually raised about 3 of the past 4 hands with legitimate holdings, and this would be a great spot to play back at me in general, especially given that this looks like a pure button steal to top it off. I consider that if I call here with position, I could try to re-steal the pot if that's what's happening, and with that, I go ahead and make the call. The flop comes out king 5-4 with 2 spades. He leads out for a little more than half pot, $40. I would expect my opponent to c-bet here with any hand given his re-raise, so continuing with my initial thought process, I make the call here with the idea that I can reevaluate on the turn. On the turn, we see the 8 of clubs. Our hand improves now, but honestly, this could either be a really good card or a really bad card. If our opponent has an ace high that missed the flop, we're ahead now. If he's got a pocket pair or a hand like ace king, king queen, then we're still behind and potentially going to get drawn further into the hand. My opponent leads again for $65. We're getting about 2.5 to 1 on a call, which helps if we're behind. I still think there's a chance we're ahead, though given the double barrel, I'm definitely having some doubts now. Given that we have some equity though, I do go ahead and make the call. On the river, we see the 7 of hearts. There's now 4 to a straight out there, and it's honestly a pretty scary board. My opponent pretty quickly pushes all in for $209 total. I'm a bit taken aback by this push. If he's got a big pocket pair or paired the king on the flop, this river card doesn't seem like a good one to push against given the board texture, especially since the board likely hits my calling range more than whatever he's holding. The more I ponder on it, the more this feels like a bluff that just wants me to fold. I eventually put the chips into call, and before we see the result, I'm going to pause for a second to let you digest my thought process through this one. Let me know what you think about my reasoning and decision making throughout this hand in the comments. I'm curious what you all would do here. Okay, let's see the outcome. My opponent shakes his head, and it seems my read may have been right, until he shows pocket queens. It turns out he did have a pocket pair after all, and played it in a way that honestly didn't make sense to me. Putting myself in his shoes, I don't think I could 3-barrel with an overcard and a 4 to a straight on the board, but I'll give him credit for getting the most out of me. Reflecting on this, I'm a little disappointed in my play on this one. I usually give players more credit at these stakes, and with that, I could have easily just folded to the 3-bet pre-flop and saved myself some heartache. My opponent is actually a regular at the lodge who just started a new vlog under the name of Nick Cbet. I'm hoping he'll leave a comment sharing his thought process on this one. A few minutes later, we pick up Jack 10 suited under the gun. It folds to me, and I raise to $10. 3 players call, and we get an incredible flop when it comes Jack 7-5 with 2 spades. We've got top pair and a flush draw to go with it. I c-bet for $25, and a short stack pushes all in for $37 total. I make a pretty easy call when it comes back to me, and we're heads up for a full run out. The turn brings the queen of clubs, and the river the 8 of spades. We hit the flush, announce our hand, and our opponent mucks, so we scoop a little one to start digging our way back out of the hole we found ourselves in.
You have the flush draw.
Later that orbit, we pick up pocket 10 sitting on the button. The hijack limps in, the cutoff on my right raises to $10, and I re-raise to $45. It folds back to the hijack, who cold calls my 3-bet, and the cutoff ends up folding. The hijack checks dark, and the 2 of us head to the flop, which comes 6-4-2 with 2 clubs. This is one of the best flops we're going to see with pocket 10s, and I don't want to price my opponent in to outdraw me, so I go ahead and push all in for my last $178. My opponent quickly folds, and we scoop another much-needed pot.
You would call that?
I would have had to, yeah. Do you have an overpair?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
We're almost completely card dead for the next 2.5 hours. We get maybe 4 playable hands in that time where we pick up a few small pots, but nothing really noteworthy for inclusion in the vlog. Given that we're pretty much just paying to sit here, I decide to grab a rack with the intention of leaving as soon as the blinds reach me again, finishing out this orbit. The dealer, who just joined the table, sees me grab a rack and says, "You're leaving me already?" I explain how I've been card dead for so long, but if he can deal me a hand on this last one, then I'll stay. I'll even straddle for $5. So I put my straddle out, and it folds around to the player who cracked my aces earlier, who now raises to $20. I've been keeping a close eye on this player since that hand happened, and I found that he makes smallish pre-flop raises around $10 or so when he has a questionable hand, and bigger raises around $20 to $25 or so when he has a premium hand. Given his raise here, I expect he's probably got a big pair or maybe ace-king at worst. I look down and see pocket nines, so when the small blind and big blind both call, I make a pretty easy call here as well with the hopes of flopping a set. Before the flop comes, some interesting action happens.
I check. All right. I check 2.
I checked 3.
All right.
So we've all checked dark, giving the pre-flop raiser first action on the flop, which comes 9-2-10 rainbow. We flop second set. This opponent leads for $60, a pretty big bet relative to the pot. Given the bet size, I'm certain now that he's got an overpair. The small blind folds, and the big blind calls. With the big blind calling, I don't want any scare cards to come on the turn, given that there's 2 to a straight on the board, so I go ahead and pull the trigger, pushing all in for $238. Almost 2 minutes pass with the original bettor counting his chips out before finally making the call. The small blind deliberates for a bit, and I'm not sure if I want to call or not from him, but after another minute of waiting, he does release his hand, so we get to see a run out, where I suspect we're avoiding another 2-outer against the same opponent as earlier. On the turn, we see the Queen of Hearts, and the river, the 7 of Diamonds.
I got a set.
7-9.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I could feel the color rush from my face. I thought he had an overpair. How did he hit a straight?
He hit it. Yeah.
There's no straight there. There's no straight.
Oh!
Fooling me.
Oh, man. I
Need a friend.
Yeah, I need an 8, though.
Whew. The color's returning to my face. Our read was right, and we got the money in before any scare cards showed. Even better, the player who folded said he would have hit a straight, reinforcing our flop shove and getting us the max value. This was a huge pot for us. We're finally back in the black for the night.
Yeah, I was behind even with 2 pairs.
You did it. You got me to stay.
Overall, this wasn't a big session in terms of the results, but it was definitely an interesting one. The Queen 8 hand in particular was an atypical one for me. I don't usually play hands the way I did in that one. I'm curious, leave your comments below. I want to hear what you think of my thought process through that one, even though, you know, it didn't have the outcome that I was hoping for. In the end, we came out ahead. We bought in for $500. We cashed out for $617. After $50 of expenses for the hourly fees and tips, we see a profit of $67. So it's not a big win, but it's a win nonetheless, which I'm very happy to take considering we were down for so long in that session and card dead as well. Either way, I appreciate you watching. Thanks so much for checking out the channel. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next one. Take care.